Hi, this is Leo Schumann. Welcome to our module on creating and displaying custom content types. So in this module, we're going to talk in some detail about defining content types and then adding, finding, and configuring new items of that type, both individually and as a group. We'll talk about displaying lists of particular items of content, or nodes as we're learning to call them, in something we'll learn is called a view. And then we're going to talk about creating multiple versions of a given item of content. To start with, well, how do we define content types? Well, you would choose to add a content type on the Structure Content Types screen. As we'll see in a moment, we're going to assign field titles and configure a number of settings. We'll always have to provide a name, likely a description, and then we're going to go through a series of settings which we'll learn define the defaults that we'll see when we go to create an individual node of this content type. Let's jump in and just do it. So I'm going to go to the Structure menu, and I'll go to Content Types, and I'm going to add a new content type to the defaults that we have at the moment, article and basic page, as well as the poll content type, which was added by the poll module which we installed. I'm going to call my content type book. And this is going to be the definition of a book to be reviewed. Now, the first thing I'll define is a titled field label. This will be the basic name of a given item. In this case, I'm going to call it book name. That's what I'll want people to use as the title for these items. I'll leave it optional whether to preview before submitting, but I'll give some guidelines here. Please describe a book to be reviewed later. Under publishing options, we'll see that we have a choice whether things should be published by default. Publish is simply a flag which defines whether or not a given item can appear in the site and can be used as part of publishing workflows. For now, we'll just leave that turned on by default. And we'll go ahead and let the items be promoted to the front page, although we'll be working with this later. Notice you could also say that new items always stick to the top of lists, and new items by default create new revisions. We'll come back to that setting. Under display settings, we have a choice of whether to display the author and date information for each item. But here, the author we really care about would be the author of the book, not the author of the person creating this particular node describing the book. So I'm going to go ahead and disable that. Under comment settings, well, if what we're creating are book records to be reviewed elsewhere, I think the reviews will serve the place of comments. Now, if I wanted to have comments directly on this book item, I could leave them open. Note, we could also close or hide them here. We've seen that already. And define whether by default comments would be threaded, how many per page, title, reply form on the same page or not, and whether or not comment previews are disabled, optional, or required. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just hide the commenting capability because I don't want people commenting directly on the books. Rather, they would write reviews, which will come later. As far as menu settings, this is where we determine whether a given individual item of content can be added to a menu, and if so, to which menus could it possibly be added? In this case, I don't want any of my books to be added directly to any menu. Instead, we'll create a summary page for lists of books and lists of reviews. So I'm going to disable all the menus so that individual book items can't be added directly to a menu. From here, I'd have the option to save and add additional fields to my book content type, but we'll come back to that later. For the moment, I'll just save these settings. And we see now my book appears as an available content type under my content types list. And if I went to add new content, I could now add a book to be reviewed.